stress.
It's been proven to cause or worsen a number of health problems.
And it's a real double whammy.
Depression can hit, heart attacks can hit, diabetes. That is our enemy.
What is stress?
My guest today is cardiologist
Dr. Columbus Batiste.
He is a plant-based interventional cardiologist.
You need to commit to changing your nutrition. Not your diet, your nutrition.
High salt, high sugar, high fat foods plays a major role.
Over 600,000 people die of heart disease every year in the U.S. for both men and women.
We have to combat the Western diet.
And with that said, welcome Dr. Columbus Batiste to the show. How are you doing?
I'm well. So nice to see you and to meet you finally. It's been quite some time.
So here's the first thing that happened. When I started researching you, I was like, am I researching a formidable expert in cardiology? Or am I interviewing a plant-based lifestyle specialist? Or am I interviewing a profound master of stress? And I realized it's all free. It's all together. Yeah. How did it come about that you just managed to start focusing on these three very profound and interrelated areas?
Well, that's a great question. I think at the foundation, it's clear heart disease was just meant for me. So if I'm truthful, I'm an avid sports guy. I love sports. And so I wanted to get into medicine to become a sports physician. And I fell in love with the heart. And after I started falling in love with the heart and just how it works, the physiology, the pharmacology, from a procedural standpoint, that's really what absorbed my time. But I quickly learned is the fact that there's so many factors that come into play for this development of this thing called heart disease. And that was really the foundational piece that then led to identifying a common thread with every patient that seemed to come through my office. And that was stress. In some form or fashion, at the centerpiece was always stress. And you could see it on their faces. And that really was the beginning and the launch of everything.
And how did the plant-based lifestyle, or when did that fall into place for you as well?
So the honest truth is, I grew up vegetarian, and I had a piece of meat that made me feel horrible when I was a child, and I just stopped eating it. And so the interesting part was that when I became a physician and started talking to patients, they would say to me, "Doc, what should I eat?" And I honestly didn't know. So I would make up stuff, Joe. I would start saying, "Oh, just do good. Just do well 4 out of 7 days. No one does. No one's perfect. Just 4/7 rule." I came up with these idiotic sayings. And then I started going to the local bookstore and just looking for books on nutrition that had any doctor's name behind it. But it didn't resonate. I was still focused on procedures and doing what I do. And all of a sudden I got hit in the face. Mike Tyson used to say, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face, right?
That's a great one. Yeah.
So I got a gut check when my dad basically passed away. And he passed away from diabetes, which is like the twin brother of coronary artery disease, And so in that moment, after kind of dealing with my own personal stressors and regret and guilt and everything associated with it, that where traditional medicine had failed him, that I began to start to really search and dig, this time truthfully and really in reality. And I started digging, and that's when I started exploring and identifying that the power of lifestyle, the power of plant-based nutrition. And so that was the convergence of everything inside of that moment, that I recognized the stressors that exist. I recognized the power of lifestyle, and specifically a whole food plant-based diet, to really transform. And after learning and researching and continuing to learn, I recognized all the things I could have said to many patients before, as well as my own father, to point them in a different direction.
Well, we only know what we know when we know it.
Yeah.
So that's it. You look very healthy. So have you always been quite robust, and then the plant-based diet or going vegan added to that?
So what's interesting, so I mentioned that I was a vegetarian. I was really a junk food-itarian. Any kind of junk food, I was eating it. It just what maybe didn't have major animal products inside of it. And so when I decided and I committed to this after I learned it, I said, you know what? I'm going all in. So if I take you back for a second, after my dad passed, I was taking care of work, I had a young family, but everything else just went dark. So it includes I didn't pay my life insurance bill came in the mail and I forgot to pay it. And so I went down this journey of whole food plant-based and I went in hard. I did fasting. I went in completely raw and I was going and everyone around me was like, what are you doing? And so all of a sudden my financial planner said, Columbus, you need to get your life insurance reinstated. I was like, oh man, I can't believe I let that lapse. And so she was like, well, you're going to need to get blood work and everything done again because it's been quite some time. And so, I was still like, no, let me get in shape. Let me get in the gym first before I do it. And she's like, no, just get this done right now. So I did it. And one of the things, and this is my own personal story, which isn't like some transformative life disease process, but I went from preferred to super preferred 5 years later. So she said to me, I never forget her words. She said, Columbus, no one ever gets older and improves their status. No one, that doesn't happen at all, and that was so I was fortunate that I got in before I adopted this before I had developed horrific disease, but I was able to kind of see that the evidence of it from even an insurer standpoint, and they're placing their bets. They're placing their bets on who's going to survive, right? That's the insurance game, and so I was fortunate. That said a lot right there.
I would just add to that you kind of downplayed a little bit like it wasn't a transformation story, but I actually think it's very hard going from preferred to super preferred than it is to go to high risk to low risk, because there's just so much more motivation to get out of suffering than there is to just become even better. So I'm impressed with that. And that's the kind of thing I'm trying to understand now. I've had my own journey recovering to some degree from diabetes, but I'm finding the okay to preferred level much harder than the high risk, the red light warning to the warning lights off. So that's an interesting little accolade there. So just pursuing these three areas, just so that people understand, in your mind, what is stress?
Stress is an internal reaction to an external stimuli. And so simply put, when I restate this, stress is our demands of life minus our resources. So when we feel that we don't have enough resources to deal with the demands of life, and I always say, so let's say, for instance, if we schedule this on a day I'm seeing patients, and I know I need to meet Joe at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, but yet I have a clinic that started at 6:15 Pacific Standard Time. I don't have the resources to give you what is needed in that moment. And you can make that analogy on so many different areas, whether or not it's finances, whether or not it's whatever the issue is. And so that stress then begins to take a load, a toil on you as your body is trying to adjust to these stressors of life. And this is where you start to kind of get into these different terminologies of allostasis, allostatic load, and all those things in particular don't matter. But you just imagine that if I have to stand on one leg for a period of time, I can adjust to it. But what is the result, the load of me dealing with this stress? I'm starting to contract different muscle groups I haven't done for a while. Now, after a period of time, that wear and tear, and I get fatigued from just solely standing and adjusting to this stressor of standing on one leg, that eventually I fall down, right? And that's the wear and tear of repeated chronic stress that folks play by listening to the political, scene that's out there, by dealing with finances, relationships, environmental issues, traffic, relationship, kids and raising them, or even the idea of fear of having diabetes or having high blood pressure or having high cholesterol.
Wow, that's a very good explanation. And how do they interplay the plant-based diet, so nutrition, stress, and the heart?
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, I always say that stress is dessert spelled backwards. So what ends up happening when we get stressed? We turn to something. We go on the double date. We start saying we crave these things, these comfort foods. Because the reality of these high salt, high sugar, high fat foods, they play a role in which they actually decrease our stress temporarily. But because they dissipate so fast, we continue to go back to them, and as well as the fact there's no nutritional value. So now we almost develop this dependence, and we're seeking out these fake resources from the idea of these adverse foods that play a role in almost in their societally they're acceptable. So, perhaps now, so drinking may not be acceptable in many circles, smoking is not acceptable in many circles, all these other things, but what is universally acceptable is food. It's food. It's food. And so it comes back, it comes back to roost, and it takes hold, and we turn to this late night, during the day, we're lack of sleep, and all these things begin to cycle.
So it kind of spins out of control because my past was with what you might call food addiction or binge
Hmm.
eating, and I
Yes.
found that I would get stressed, and I was working in banking, and I would get
Mhm.
stressed, and then I would try to relieve the stress with junk food, which makes you more stressed, and then
Mhm.
you get unwell, and you've got less energy, but the stress
Mhm.
is still the same. Like my bank didn't care if I was tired or not, and you end up in this very ineffective pattern that just makes it worse and worse and worse, and then you get diabetes or something else.
Yes. That's right. That's right. Or worse, broken heart syndrome, right? And where the heart literally just freezes. Your example exactly replicates what I saw in every patient. I've seen in myself too as well at times. It's this vicious cycle that can begin to spin out of control.
It might be different for everyone, it might not be, but where is the weak link in that? Where do you step out of that? Stress, eat junk food, feel bad, stress. How do you deal with someone who's in that cycle?
The corollary to that stress equation of stress equals demands minus resources is that our health equals resiliency divided by stress. The higher our stress, the poorer our health. And so you're not going to get rid of the stress because remember, part of it is it's our perception of how we perceive the world. They say, there's a saying by a religious leader who says that life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you respond, how you perceive the world. So when I enter into a day and I'm double booked in clinic, I have procedures, I have meetings because of my administrative duties, I'm working on community projects, I'm a dad and I'm a husband, I can feel stress. And so when I stop and I take a deep breath and I begin the process of saying the day is going to happen the way the day is going to happen, and I begin to put things in, change my perspective and my outlook, then that begins the process of transformation. And that's hard to do of stopping yourself and taking a deep breath in those moments. And so I'm a real big advocate of building the resiliency as opposed to eliminating the stress.
This is amazing. I'm not just saying that because my whole journey through that process was trying to eliminate the stress, which is hella stressful.
Mhm.
trying to
Yes, it
and
is.
it's stressful trying to get rid of stress. And what the image that came to mind then was the insight that the food you're doing isn't helping.
Yes.
It's reducing your resiliency. That is such a clever way to word it because that whole journey, it feels like that food is helping. It's 10 minutes where I'm in like zoned out, but it's not
Yes.
helping.
Not at all. That's why on another realm, I'll call it nutritional stress and nutritional resiliency of what we're really adding. But what you brought up is so important. So I remember I had a colleague when I first started out in practice, and he had a horrible story where he passed away at a very young age from advanced colon cancer. And I remember after his passing, I sat there and I was like, you know what? Life is short. I need to get rid of this stress. I gotta get home. I need to enjoy life. And like you said, I created more stress in my life during those moments, trying to eliminate work and stress. Until I finally realized it's not about eliminating stress. It's really about building my resiliency and prioritizing my resiliency and making that my goal, enjoying the process of how do I make the adjustments.
This is so incredible. I wasn't expected to go this way, but I'm going to share this. So in my journey, I'm in managing stress. I'm still doing it like not so much now, but I'm still doing it where I'm looking at the life I want to create and I'm measuring it based on how well I'm complying with my diabetes safe diet. And if I start to go off the diet, I reduce my activity. So I do less music, I make less videos, I do less business. And recently I've been thinking I can't live in that way indefinitely. I have to actually go for what I want to do and just build the resilience. I didn't say it like that, but that's what you're saying. And it's like, of course that's the case. You just got to go for what you really want, because that's what's going to give you more motivation to build the resilience.
Yes.
It's very clever. I really like that. Wow. On the same subject, really, but a little bit more to do with some of your own past and related to, and I think this is very interesting where I heard you talk about the relationship between stress and racial dynamics in communities where there isn't so much access to plant-based nutrition. And, one of the stats, I'm sure there's many, but one of them was like African Americans are like 30% more likely to die of a heart disease than non-Hispanic whites. I can't believe how massive that number is. And the phrase that I heard you say was building nutritional resilience to combat racial stress. I was like, wow, what a link. Can you talk a little bit about that and your work in that area?
Yeah, I'll tell you that one of the things that I realized almost immediately as I recognized that my penance for what I wasn't able to do for my father was what I was going to do going forward with my patients, irrespective of what impact it would have on my professional career. And as I started doing that, I recognized that I can't give a one script to everyone, whether a person was of South Asian descent, of Asian descent, of African American, of Latino, that I needed to be very specific with their cultural experience. And so obviously it's easy for me to begin in my own cultural experience, being African American, to really recognize some of the confounding factors that plays a role inside of why health is not readily accessible to everyone or why people are not healthful. And so as I started doing that, I recognized that food plays a major role. And so one, there is an astronomical level of stress that everyone feels. We talked about that.
Yeah.
There's an additional level of stress that, listen, they'll say, okay, I want you to pick out the bald guys, right? With the nice shaped head. They're going to say, okay, yeah, I see Joe and I see Columbus there. Yeah, okay, we're good, right? Now but when the description comes in, it may say, well, who is the African American? Who's the black cardiologist out there? Who's that black cardiologist? And, the plant-based one. And then they may, and so you'll have this characterization that comes in immediately that's tied to who I am. And that is who I am, right? And so, but now you can never escape that. So when it's said in a negative connotation, that's another layer of stress that people of color or perhaps of different of sexual orientations may encounter, right? That others do not, that layers upon the financial, the relationship, the work, the environmental, all these stressors. So it's an added layer of stress that I believe that studies have revealed plays a significant role in disparities. So when you look at nutrition, now you're dealing with this crucible of conflict. Now you insert inside of it, communities of color notoriously are ladled with less health promoting foods. They're in food insecure territories. They're in food deserts or food apartheid states filled with fat, sugar, and salt and highly processed foods that are there. Quick service, the funding from the government causes the cost to be lower, so it's readily accessible. But the psychology of it, not only is the advertisements directed, but also in these areas where there's lack of resources of parks and so forth, that now these areas, they have playgrounds inside of it, playgrounds in the fast food restaurants. So now you're dealing with nutritional stress, that now I'm igniting that gasoline in this crucible with nutrition, with foods that are going to inflame disease. So now not only am I dealing with the issues of the stress, which impacts on a cellular level, down to the telomeres, down to the epigenes that are there, now I ignite it by adding in these foods that are deleterious, that lead to increased obesity, early onset diabetes, and early onset cardiovascular disease and cancers. And we begin to wonder, why is there this persistence? And so now we turn the tables and we say, well, we can't afford to eat healthfully. And this is my culture and who I am. It's not your culture, who you are. This is the environment you've been placed in, that you've developed a culture based upon your environment. You've adjusted. And so trying to provide education to inform everyone, whether or not it's African Americans or anyone else, that your environment does not have to dictate who you are or what your culture is. And that, yes, we can eat affordably by, let's make convenience work for us. Let's get the prepackaged frozen vegetables that won't go bad. So Joe, I'll never forget. I'm gonna tell you this the last thing, because I can ramble on, right? So I had this one patient, and they weren't African American, but they were Hispanic. And I was giving my pitch. Going there hard on why you should eat plant-based, right? Inside my office. And he looked at me and said, Doc, I have a 500 square foot apartment. There's cockroaches there. I can't afford to do all that stuff. I don't have this. And I remember stopping in my tracks and just like, man, I'm giving this guy pie in the sky stuff. I said, let's get down and practical with him in my mind rapidly. And I said, okay, scratch everything I said. I said, we're going to get frozen food. We're going to get canned beans free of salt, BPA free cans. We're going to get frozen rice. That way it won't go bad. You have a microwave? He was like, yeah. I said, we're going to make bowls. We're going to get in here. We're going to get you all the things you need to transform your diet and nutrition. And he looked at me because I was speaking his language at that point. We're not worried about the fact that it's going to go bad because it's frozen. We're not going to worry about, I said, here's the thing. I said, let's look at where you go out to eat. And I took a few moments. I typed on the computer, looked them up. I was like, okay, here are options that you can eat when you go this place, this place, this place. That will help you. So I'm not minimizing his personal experience and journey. I'm acknowledging it. I'm not empowering him to give him an excuse. What I'm doing is, because I believe there's multiple facets to it. I believe that you have to make a plan and then you have to kill the plan. Once you kill the plan, then you're going to achieve success.
Now you've said it. What do you mean by kill the plan?
So it stems from the concept of pre-mortem planning. So in business, and you probably know this already, that if I'm making a plan, a project, I may do pre-mortem planning, which means that in medicine, when I have an autopsy, I'm trying to figure out why the person died, what went wrong, what failed, what's not helping that person anymore. But in business, if I identify barriers or issues that may arise, I can address those real time to kind of figure out, okay, if I solve for this, the plan is going to be successful. The same thing when it comes to making a lifestyle. If you say, okay, Joe, what am I going to eat today? What are you going to eat today? Right? And you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to eat healthfully today. But okay, what's going to happen if there's a car accident outside, or you don't get a chance to go to the grocery store, or if you have to go pick up the kids, or if this happens, that happens. Now, once you identify that these things are likely to happen, let's solve for it. What are all the excuses, the reasons why you're not going to be successful on your journey on this particular week? I have this to do, that to do. Okay, now that you've identified that, let's solve for it. How can you still stay afloat by solving for those problems?
Yeah, great. So I want to talk a little bit more about the environment and the cultures where there's these food issues. I just wanted to share that I realized that when you was talking that I grew up in an urban environment like that in London that was quite poor. It was multiracial. I'm mixed race myself. My father's Nigerian, Irish, etc. And what I realized when you was talking was that's the way I ate. I ate fast food. I didn't have a food issue when I was in that environment. What changed, I just realized when you were talking, what changed is as I left that environment and I went to university and I ended up in a corporate job, now I've got an eating issue. because my environment changed. I didn't have it if I go home. I have it when I'm at the bank. And that's when I tried to change it. And it was when I tried to change it that it got worse. How do you think communities can support themselves to start realizing that this is a really unhealthy way to eat? It's got to come from within the community. I'm thinking. What are your thoughts on that?
It does. Well, I mean, I think that every community, there are healthful items embedded and ingrained in every culture for the most part, right? Now, obviously, when we're speaking about fast food and things of that and convenience foods in that way, I first start off when I'm counseling someone on an individual basis is tell me what you eat on a regular basis. Once they identify that, I'm just simply trying to make healthful plant-based swaps. So, or healthier versions. And it brings me back tonight to, I never forget, there is a big event inside the United States called the Essence Festival. And so I had the unique opportunity. So it's Essence is a Black owned magazine that's on entertainment and wellness. And so they put on this big event, like a big party down in New Orleans in Louisiana. And so they decided they were going to start doing a health aspect on there. So I got invited several years, had the good fortune of participating. I'll never forget driving around. So an Uber driver picked me up, African American, and he was like, he picked me up and he was like, yeah, I checked you out. I know what you're about. And I was like, okay, you ready to go plant-based? He was like, nah, it's not happening. I spent literally an hour and a half in traffic throwing everything I could at him to get him to go plant-based, using his son. He was like, no, I'm not letting him eat the stuff I eat. And he was just like, no, until the end, I got him convinced to try a plant-based alternative meat, one of the burgers. And he was willing to try that. And so there is a role when you're able to allow someone to still feel as if they're having what they're used to, but you're beginning the process of opening the door. I'm not stopping there, but I'm opening the door to get them to transition over. Because we have to step away from the thing that everyone's not going to come into. We're on this marathon of life. And so because you're at 26 miles of 26.2 and you're achieving success and you're rolling and doing really well, and the person is at 0.2 miles, I can't forget what it was like to be there. And the fact that not everyone is going to say, oh, I'm ready to just eat fruits and vegetables and whole grains and that's it. It doesn't happen like that practically. So, meeting a person where they're at, but not saying stay there. You have to progress. You have to improve becomes important.
One of the statements I heard you say, and I think you've picked it up, but you're a proponent of it, which is moderation kills. And that really struck me. And you said that about your father, that moderation was his downfall because he wasn't smoking, wasn't obese, and he ended up passing due to diabetes complications, right? In my life, as I said to you in the beginning, I've improved my diet to a higher level with a vegan diet, but I'm still letting in moderation. And it's like it ties into what you just said. There's levels to this game. So I'm dealing with vegan chocolate covered bananas and a little bit of coconut ice cream, which back in the day would be like, look at that health freak. And
Exactly.
now because of the diabetes, it's enough to stop me going completely clear. I'm like a balloon just about to go, and I'm just like, I just have a bit of this. So can you talk about the mindset of moderation kills and how important it is in your work and for people to really recover?
It's so important. And going back to my dad for a bit, you're right. I mean, my dad actually owned a health food store back in the 70s. So he had to stop the health food store because of me. I was a pleasant surprise. And so my mom was pregnant with me. They were like, okay, you have to kind of settle down and stop. So he knew about various aspects of the health, but he also loved his sweets and certain things. And unfortunately, doctors told him he needed to eat meat. My mother used to make vegetarian meat, gluten, and various things like that. So it's very interesting, this idea of moderation, that how it strikes us. And part of it is we only use the words moderation when it comes to things we probably shouldn't be having. How many people ever say, let's be moderate with water? Let's be moderate with our salad. let's be moderate with the fruit. It's only the things we know we shouldn't have that we're trying to justify. And so in those moments, we have to look and the other aspect of moderation is we're oftentimes comparing ourselves to others and saying, well, I'm only having this in comparison to the community. And so I'm better than the other community or against my people I'm seeing. And we have to stop that. Our race is against ourselves. How can we improve ourselves maximally? And so my wife's terminology that she got from another business leader is we have to inspect what we expect. So as you're going down this journey and it's like, okay, you know what? Hey, I love my whatever sweets are too as well. I'm a recovering sugarholic too. I love my sweets, right? But if I'm measuring my weight, I'm measuring my blood pressure, I'm measuring my blood sugar, and I have a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor on to kind of see how it relates. And I see that my numbers are going up and down just as a result of me having these small indiscretions, so to speak. I have to honestly ask myself, what really am I trying to do? What's my goal? What do I want? What do you want? What are you willing to do to get what you want?
So you have a continuous glucose meter.
I have had them at times. I actually have one here in the office just to kind of track and see where I'm at. I'm a little bit. I wear rings and everything. Just
Right.
I like data.
I'm going to get one. Do you think diabetics should absolutely have one?
So I'm not an endocrinologist, but I do think the immediate feedback of seeing like the time of day that you're eating, I think the types of foods, that understanding that if I consume even the same food late at night, what it does to my body and the metabolism as we shift, I think it's powerful for you to get a perspective.
Another area I want to talk to you about is the confusion around veganism and health. And because vegan, there's lots of science to show that a vegan diet is more healthy than a regular diet, but it also feels like the other vegan diets are borrowing that label. And one of the most difficult things I had when I went vegan was all of the foods that were junk foods that I completely stopped eating. When I first went vegan, I started eating them again because I'm like, well, it's vegan. So I was having vegan croissants, which is terrible for a diabetic, vegan bread, vegan pastries, vegan cakes. I'm like, it's still my diabetes doesn't really care. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts on, I mean, I understand we know that there's ethical vegans, there's planetary
Yes.
vegans, and there's healthy vegans, but you're a doctor. So what do you
Yes.
say about this approach to veganism regarding it being a health process?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that and in the way in which you said it, because first and foremost, I'm a physician. That's where my knowledge base comes into play. And I think I've slowly adopted and understood, learned more and more from an animal rights perspective, from being an ethical vegan as well as environmental. But at the heart, the issue of health revolves around the Western diet. The Western diet takes on many fronts. Gluten-free, keto, plant, vegan, all of it. That still is the Western diet. They're all Western diet. That is our enemy. That is the sole enemy is the Western diet. We have to combat the Western diet.
That's so
right?
clever.
And so we have to I use it because you're international. In the US, I'll say the standard American diet is our common thread enemy, but it's all the Western diet. And we have to get rid of it. As the Western diet spreads across the globe, we have the globalization of disease that's happening. So what purpose is it for us to save the environment, for us to save the animals, and all of us die? Or we're not, what's worse than death? Is that we're walking around crippled and dependent upon the very institutions that we like to criminalize. And we say, well, you're just part of pharmaceutical agency companies. Well, you are contributing to the need for pharmaceutical companies by ingesting the Western diet.
So a couple of things there. It was so powerful. I'm quite a visual person. And what you did with that, like sometimes you get confused. There's all these different foods. They're all vegan. What are you eating? And all this. You literally just put a lasso around. It's a new, like a Venn diagram. It was a new category that I haven't really. I consider the Western diet to be the meat-based diet. But you're right. If you're having chips and a burger, even if it's vegan, it's a Western diet, and that's its
right.
primary effect. That is brilliant. That is really good. It's so clear. And I mean, you said a lot there that was really powerful, but it's like the health aspect. What came to mind was You can have both. You can be planetary beneficial for the animals and be healthy. We don't
Yes.
have
There
to
you go.
choose. We don't have to choose one of the three. We can have all.
Yes. Absolutely. That there is the key. And that's what I try and drive folks towards is the fact that your predominance needs to be based on, that's why I've moved away from labels, right? Tell me not about use a label of I'm vegan, I'm vegetarian. Tell me about the foods that you eat. And here's the question I asked Joe, right? And I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to flip the table. I'm interviewing you for a second.
Go for it.
So what I asked, a patient I asked this just yesterday, tell me what you eat for your health. And I can't tell you how many times I get a blank stare. Tell me what you eat for your health.
Yeah,
right?
I'm pretty clear with that. I eat a lot of salads.
Good.
I eat as a diabetic, I commit to having a salad at every meal, even breakfast,
Wonderful.
because it's the
And
green.
yes, and here's the key. Like I'll follow that up. Now we're not saying ranch soup with a few pieces of lettuce, are we? We're saying
I'm talking about a proper salad.
Love it.
I mean, I'm very fortunate. I live in Chiang Mai, and I can get that stuff delivered for a few dollars, like organic salad, all chopped up. I don't think I could make it myself, so I'm cheating a bit, but I'll happily take the help.
That's right. That's right. But that's so powerful. The fact that you recognize that I'm getting in my green leafy vegetables, I'm getting in my berries, my seeds, my legumes. I'm having the components that are empowering my body, that are building resiliency,
But
mind, body, and soul.
But to be honest, what I'm also doing is I've been adding more and more oily foods. Like you get these mushroom meats out here. And I'm not really making this about me because everybody does this. You're doing really good. You're having your salads. I have tempeh, it's the high protein, low fat. And after a while, I'm like, oh, I fancy a little bit of that dressing. And because I'm diabetic, even just a little bit, like a dressing is a small tub, but there's enough in that to ruin the power. I don't get sick, but it's enough to stop it being a healthy meal for a diabetic. And I think that's what you're pointing out here. It's like my moderation, the self-delusion, the old habit of managing stress is just enough to keep even me eating slightly below par. But the question I want to ask back to you is this, is what is the effect of a healthy vegan diet on cardiac health?
Oh man, I'll tell you, there's so much power that's there. The power is there when you look at a healthful vegan diet, when you're looking at the fiber that's there. And just take first one of the big areas when we look at cholesterol and inflammation, we look at the subparticles of cholesterol, and we look at that the consumption of these fiber-rich foods, that means all of your greens and leafy vegetables and whole grains and so forth, that what it does, number one, it decreases the absorption of cholesterol. And number one, and number two is that if you're not even consuming these dietary fats, there's less that you have to worry about. They also work at the bile acid level, right? And binds it. So in that way, the body has to produce more bile acids, which means it uses up the cholesterol. So that causes a lowering. That's why when you look at large scale studies, looking at things like the portfolio diet, you look at DASH diet, you're seeing a reduction in the cholesterol. Not just the cholesterol, the subparticles that are very detrimental, right? So your apoprotein B and the small dense LDL, that you're seeing a reduction in those. Not only that, you're also looking from a standpoint of the endothelium and what begins to happen in the endothelium that's there as you consume these dietary rich vegetables that have rich in antioxidants, your berries and so forth, and you begin to decrease the infiltration into the endothelium, the lining that allows it to become more elastic and reversing it, which your studies have shown. That means that, so you think of like your endothelium, which is the lining of your vessels. Think of any of a blood vessel is like a garden hose, a tube that's there. The more compressible it is, the healthier it is. The more rigid, think of a garden hose that's been baking in the sun. The more rigid it is and it doesn't compress, that means it's more brittle. That means that you're more inclined to have coronary events, strokes, high blood pressure that's there. So this process is so transformative. Not even to mention with diabetes, same thing, diabetes, right? So when you're kind of looking in terms of decreasing the intracellular lipids, when you're, so we go on and on and on, that's there. And that fiber, why fiber is so important. I always describe it. I've been married 26 years. In 26 years, if I were to give my wife a gift and I was like, oh, honey, it's our anniversary, and I throw her $5 or $50 or whatever it is, she's going to look at me and just like, what? But if I wrap that inside of a box, a pretty bow on it, all of a sudden the anticipation of what did Columbus buy me as she's unraveling that box and she takes it apart and so forth, and before she finally gets to it, that's like fiber, giving us the gift of the nutrients inside of it. When we have that fiber that's there, our body is slowly taking away that package of that present that's there for us that allows the metabolism and the level of the blood sugars to be sustained, as well as to help on all other fronts.
I know this isn't your area of specialization, but in my own anecdotal evidence, I went vegan around 2014. And I was doing it in not the greatest way because I was having way too much sugar. It was part of a thing I was involved in. It's like eat as much as you can, high carb, low fat. And my blood sugars were terrible. But because I was plant-based, currently now, and I've got a much better HbA1c now, it's like 5.7, 5.8. I don't have any of these diabetic complications. It seems like even though there was damage being done, there was also some protection from being plant-based. I'm not advocating for it. You got to get your blood sugars down. But anecdotally, I do think that there was some benefit to having so much fiber in my diet over that period of time. So I'm very grateful for it. What do you think about the phenomena of people who go vegan? They say they're having great success. This is an amazing diet. I feel better. I look better. And suddenly they say, I'm an ex-vegan. Now meat is the best thing ever. I'm feeling really healthy. Because I know one comment that you say about this is about meat, animal protein and kidneys being an absolute disaster. So what is your thoughts on that whole phenomena of ex-vegans, and what are they doing to their body, in your opinion, as a medical professional, when they stop being plant-based and go back to animal protein?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I just gave a lecture this past weekend in the Blue Zones in Loma Linda, and someone brought up a very similar type of comment to me about, well, I didn't feel necessarily any worse when I started eating meat and so forth. And my question and my answer to folks is that we've all gotten a cold and gotten sick before in our lives. And at one moment we feel fine. The next moment, all of a sudden we have like chills and we're not feeling well. Well, that didn't just start right then when you manifest symptoms. That started long before that your body was in this fight that's there. So oftentimes when I find that people change their diets back and forth, it's a lack of knowledge and understanding of the true literature, what the literature says from a healthcare professional. And every healthcare professional is questioned in this day and age. And some are just absent of knowledge. The second thing is that what I believe is the fact that people, they're looking for the answer to what they want to hear. And so just like you ask a number of people at their advice, they're really searching for someone to agree with what they want to do anyway. And so if that's your desire to ingest animal proteins, then that's where you're going to keep searching until you find that. Oftentimes what I experience in my clinic on a one-on-one basis is that there could be issues where people are not having enough calories. They're not having enough where they're having a diverse dietary approach to eating vegan and whole food plant-based. And so they're in need of it. They're not having enough based on their level of activity or based upon their body needs. And so oftentimes I would revise the plan, right? It's still whole food plant-based. I'm still moving towards a vegan approach, but I'm looking at their calories. I'm looking at their nutrients. I'm looking at their ingestion based upon them as an individual, their level of activity and everything else. And so what begins to happen when you start to ingest these foods, we understand whether or not we're talking about endotoxins, we can talk about the gut microbiome and its processing and the development of disease kind of going forward, not instantaneously, but the combination, the fact that your digestive system, most individuals, and I've seen this, who will start eating, they're saying, oh, doc, yeah, I went back and, oh, I felt horrible at first. My stomach was trying to digest the meat. And I said, so you kept eating it? Yeah. I said, so your body was telling you whether it was the dairy, whether or not it was the meat, what it did not like, but you kept until you forced it into a compliance to be able to tolerate it. And so we see this, we see it from a standpoint with coronary disease. We understand what can impact the endothelium and the vessels spasming after one high fat meal. We see it after the ingestion of saturated fat, what begins to happen, that all of a sudden you begin to wonder, is it really truly my heartburn or is it my heart? That understanding that heart attacks happen silently, that this issue. And so this is nothing to play with. For me specifically with my patients inside of cardiology clinic, I speak to them about the salt load from a lot of the saturated fats and processed foods. I speak to them whether or not, even if they're not having ultra processed, but they're having just large intakes of animal protein, what that begins to transform inside their coronary arteries, the cholesterol efflux. You're keeping me gainfully employed. I have kids going to college. So, I still do procedures, but I would love not to. I'm trying to advise not to stay away from me if possible.
That's really good. Right, let's talk about your new book, which came out in June, I believe.
Yes.
It's called Selfish, a cardiologist's guide to healing a broken heart.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Selfish.
Selfish is basically everything packaged together. So Selfish kind of came together. There's a movie, Russell Crowe, right, who did A Beautiful Mind. And so in Beautiful Mind, he had, I believe it was schizophrenia. So all these numbers would just kind of fall into place inside that movie. Wonderful movie. He's a brilliant actor. And so I will never forget that I would start talking to patients about their stress. And I asked them things like, tell me the last thing you did for just yourself. Tell me the last thing that you laughed about. We start having these conversations dealing with stress. And I'll never forget, I heard Michael Jordan. I always joke and say, the second greatest basketball player to ever lace up the shoes, that he said that in order to be successful, you have to be selfish or else you'll never achieve. And it just struck me like the movie Beautiful Mind. And all of the letters came into place of the S standing for spiritual, the E for exercise, the L for love, the F for food, real food, whole food, plant-rich foods, vegan foods, intimacy of relationships, sleep, and humor. And as I began to kind of look and recognize that, I talk to my patients about all those aspects and recognizing that you say, how do we stick with a plan? The food is at the central core. How do I get there? Well, it starts by our mind being mindful in what we're eating, being thoughtful. And that mindfulness, that the period of focus is really what meditation or even breathing exercises can do, is bring focus to your prefrontal cortex and the impact and power they have not only on stress reduction, but of your vasculature, of reducing it, of lowering your blood pressure. Exercise goes without statement, but also not just exercise like you think of, walking and cycling and various things, but exercising belief that you can do it. It's so powerful from a standpoint, because I tell people all the time, what do we compare all these medications to that are out there prescribed for diabetics? We compare it to what? A placebo, right?
Placebo, yeah.
What is placebo? It's a sugar pill.
Yeah, but it's a belief, isn't it?
Exactly. It's an inorganic substance that has no biological activity. So they're really comparing that pill to the power of your mind, a belief. That's it. And that pill has to beat out your mind for it to go to market. Otherwise, it says there's no good. Right?
Right. Yeah.
But realizing that pill also is encompassing belief in that pill at the same time. The mind is powerful. And so exercising belief is so powerful, not only for reducing stress, but as we begin this process of saying, yes, I can, that you can actually achieve the health you deserve. When we speak to the L in love, I'm not speaking about from a amorous Valentine's Day or all this fancy stuff. I'm speaking about action of forgiveness, of gratitude, of the aspects of life that become important, of volunteering. That this becomes important. Why? Studies have actually shown an improvement, lowering of blood pressure, longevity that's achieved. That seeing one phenomenal study actually showed an improvement in blood flow to the heart muscle for people who went through forgiveness training to offset anger, forgiving ourselves if we have that vegan junk food and we're on this journey towards health.
Absolutely.
Forgiving ourselves. And so that's what I kind of walk through the book, are the components and the pillars of food and the intimacy of relationships, how it's important for community, Intimacy is key. And I don't mean in a sexual way. What I mean by intimacy is someone that you can become vulnerable
Yeah,
with,
absolutely.
someone that you can have a community that you can feel a part of. And this struck me. I didn't realize this until, actually, to be honest with you, about 3 or 4 years ago. I have some patients who are doing very well, like they're doing exceptionally well. They can sit there and lecture everyone, but they would still come back and see me in my clinic. I was like, oh, why? Okay, why are they coming back? Everything's great. They're phenomenal. I realized I was their community. I was their home base. They were like tagged. They're coming home to say, okay, you know what? And I'm coaching them. I'm encouraging them in that moment. And that was the benefit. Everyone needs community. Everyone needs someone. And if you can't find someone, that's where our sentient beings, our pets and so forth come into play, because they can still increase our oxytocin, lower our stress hormones, and give us that sense of warmth and connectivity. The S stands for sleep.
Sleep.
Second
Right.
that. Second that stands for sleep. So I'm gonna ask you, Joe. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Did you get more than 2 hours of sleep last night, Joe?
I sleep so little. Like a good night's sleep is 5.5 hours. I'm on a very different. I have ADHD and a few other things. I don't feel tired though, but I do
Okay.
try to get more sleep than I'm getting, because I think physiologically it's helpful. But yeah, that's a challenge. That's a challenge.
It can be. It can be. And so whether or not, even if you're the weekends, naps, taking moments of just quiet and relaxation can be helpful. And it's hard. I'll tell you, be honest with you. Doesn't As we get older, it can be a little bit more challenging at times. So
Absolutely.
it's much more of a focus of saying, I'm going to prioritize not just sleep, but rest, vacation, time away, staycations, to where you disconnect completely and you're allowing that body and your mind, more importantly, time to rejuvenate. And we understand that from a physiological perspective, the impact on stress hormone cascade, high blood pressure, of diabetes, of your even your a person's weight loss journey with the hormonal system of cascade of ghrelin and leptin, everything, as well as our mental well-being kind of going forward. But last, I'll say the H stands for humor or joy of life, the laughter, right? And so I don't mean like, here's the thing, I don't mean that fake laugh of haha, although that's been shown to still be beneficial. I mean, they call it Duchenne laughter and Duchenne smile. That's where you're getting the laugh lines and you're getting the smile, the crow's feet that are there because you're laughing. So what do I do after a stressful day and I'm reading studies inside the hospital? I'll put on whatever favorite comedian I have. I'll put on a sitcom that's there and I'm reading studies and I'm laughing while I'm doing it. I know my office mates now, they know, but before they were like, what's going on with this guy?
What's funny about that report?
Yeah, exactly.
That's really good. That's really good. That's very clear. I love it. This book sounds amazing. So we're getting to the end of the interview here, or the chat. And so, what is your let's ask, what is your vision or your hope for the future around these areas in which you focus? You know, plant-based diet, stress, cardiology. What do you see coming down the pipe?
Yeah, I would love to see. I mean, obviously, I want to create continual communities and do my part, but my goal is to be a light and to go into areas in which people are resistant. I love going into, I won't say hostile environments, but environments that are not plant-based friendly, that are not, I'm not, as they say, proverbially preaching to the choir. I believe that there are so many individuals around the world who number one, need to understand that you deserve health. You deserve to live your best life. We all do. This should be a born right, right? In order to be healthy. And that without health, here's the thing. I've heard of so many individuals, highly professional, highly successful, who achieve so much and then they die at a young age, at 60 or at 55. They aren't even able to reap the benefits of their labor. So letting people know that this process, the journey, is as important as the finish line. That when you do this and live a life of purpose, you're actually giving more to, when you give to other people, you're giving more to yourself. It comes back fourfold as you do it. And that's what I've learned in my life. So my goal is to continue to spread the message and from a different perspective, because sometimes people hear it best from Joe Best. Sometimes they may hear it best from Columbus. They may hear it best from any other person inside of this area who's pushing the message forward.
Yeah.
And so just being the voice amongst many to try and reach as many people as possible.
That's amazing. Well, I wish you the best with that. You've definitely helped me today. You've really opened my eyes to the categorization of the Western diet has just removed so many different vegan foods that I kind of dabble with. So you've been very helpful for me, and I'm sure you're going to help many more people. Thank you very much for this conversation. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
Cheers.